Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh and welcome to an all new pair of Ace in a Day gameplays for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's episode I shall be reviewing the I-15 M-22, a Tier 1 battle rating 1.0 reserve Russian biplane fighter. As always, starting with the plane's history, we shall be covering the I-15 from its inception through to its succession by the I-15 Biz. We begin thus. When OKB Tupolev, a Soviet aircraft design company, initiated work on their I-14 design in 1932 in response to the Soviet Air Force's requirement for a high-speed monoplane fighter, they soon feared that the design would be delivered behind schedule. To cover this potential delay, Tupolev ordered that two biplane fighter designs be built as stopgap aircraft under the designations I-14A and I-14B. Nikolai Nikolaevich Politkopov, a Soviet aircraft designer who had just been granted full amnesty from a death sentence in August of 1932, was assigned to the I-14A. For reference, the death sentence was the result of his I-6 biplane fighter design not being delivered on time in 1929. The amnesty was due to the success of his I-5 biplane fighter design, which entered service in 1931. Politkopov used the experience gained from his I-5 design as the basis for the design of the I-14A, starting work on the aircraft in February of 1933. The net result of Politkopov's efforts was a conventional biplane, featuring a fixed undercarriage and open cockpit. Its upper wing was of the ghoul-shaped type, possessing a lower wing loading and thereby benefiting the aircraft with increased manoeuvrability. This also meant the pilot had greater visibility above the aircraft, but restricted their view below and to the left and right of the aircraft. The airframe was made from a mixture of materials, wood for the wings and steel for the main fuselage, as covered in duralumin towards the front and fabric towards the rear. The plane would be armed with four 7.62mm PV-1 machine guns as mounted in the nose between the engine cylinders. The initial I-14A prototype, known as TSKB-3 Biz, flew for the first time in October of 1933, powered by a 630 horsepower Wright R1820 Cyclone radial engine as imported from America. The prototype subsequent test program, which started as of the 18th of November that year, proved successful, revealing the I-14A design to be one of the best fighters of the period, with a top speed of 367 km an hour or 228 miles per hour at an altitude of 3,048 metres or 10,000 feet. A second prototype was made available in December of that year and entered testing by the end of the year. Yet, whilst its testing was due to conclude in April of 1934, the success of the original prototype had already led to the I-14A being put into production as the I-15 within the first quarter of 1934. Upon entering production, it was realised that licence-built copies of the Wright R1820 Cyclone engine, as built by Shvetsov under the designation M-25, were not readily available and would be slow to produce. Instead, the first 59 production aircraft were fitted with imported Wright Cyclone engines, representing the first production variant of the I-15, as denoted in-game by the I-15WR variant, the WR most likely standing for Wright. Please note I've not been actually able to find an official historical I-15WR designation for the I-15 in my research. From the 60th aircraft to the 459th aircraft, 480 horsepower Shvetsov M-22 radial engines were fitted as previously used for the I-5 biplane fighter. These aircraft were given the informal designation of I-15 M-22 as represented by the plane shown on screen today. The final 270 I-15s, as produced in 1937, were to feature the Shvetsov M25 engine. These aircraft are most likely denoted in-game by the I-15R variant. Again, please note I've not been able to find an official historical I-15R designation for the I-15 in my research. In service, the I-15 received mixed reviews. The Soviet Air Force found the ghoul-shaped upper wing to be a double-edged sword, granting the aircraft better manoeuvrability with speed, but lowering the plane's low-speed stability and robbing the pilot of vision. In foreign hands, i.e. the Chinese Nationalist Air Force and the Republican forces in the Spanish Civil War, the plane was enjoyed by its pilots, being able to take the fight to the opposing air forces on at least an equal footing until the arrival of faster monoplane fighters en masse by the start of 1938. For example, early variants of the Messerschmitt Bf-109 in the hands of the Condor Legion in Spain. To resolve the issues caused by the ghoul-shaped upper wing, the I-15 would be succeeded on the production lines with the I-15 Biz, also known as the I-152, by the middle of 1937. And so, with our historical overview concluded, let us take a look at how the I-15 M-22 handles in the skies of War Thunder Arcade. Our first gameplay for today is brought to you from the ground strike map Stalingrad. For this we'll be using the following setup. Stealth belts are our machine guns, the reasoning being in my experience these are the joint most powerful belts available alongside the tracer belts. The advantage of taking the stealth belts is the lack of tracer component within the rounds, which means when you're shooting at a foe who likes to know where the rounds are coming from before they take evasive action, you'll have just that little bit more time on target, as they'll need to quickly look around them to see where the rounds are coming from, because they don't have a load of tracers whizzing past their plane to give away your shooting position. At the other end of the spectrum, if you decide to go for the tracer belts, what you'll find is, the fact they're purely armour piercing sentry tracer rounds, you'll have the higher chance of setting fires in the long haul. Albeit the stealth belts are no slouch, what with there being 3 armour piercing sentry rounds for every adjustment in sentry round. And the adjustment in sentry round can set fires, but not as reliably, I would argue, as the armour piercing sentry round because of its lack of penetrative qualities. So that's the comparison. If you want to go for a higher chance of fire, then I'd recommend the tracer belts. If you want to go for the rounds that are going to force foes into that awkward situation, but do they check where the rounds are coming from before they take evasive action, or just go on their intuition to know where the rounds are coming from, and they'll perhaps actually evade into the line of your fire rather than get out of it, then go for the stealth belts. But as for our gun convergence, we're taking the 500 meter setting as is standard in the instance I'm flying a plane where the armament is not convergence aligned, as it's based in or around the nose, in the nose entirely in this case. And as for our fuel load, we're taking the standard 30-minute fuel load to ensure we can make it to the end of the game unscaled on fuel capacity, unlike this I-15R, who's not going to make it to the end of the game. Now in that little dogfight there, what we demonstrated is how low the stall speeds of biplanes are in general, as you would expect for the class. In the case of the I-15 M-22, it's 58 km an hour. And the reason why we're able to get clean guns on target there with the I-15R and they could not do the same to us is because we eventually pushed them towards their stall speed, and that meant their nose started to dip very slightly in that extreme angle climb heading towards 90 degrees, and they couldn't keep their guns on target. In the end they had to give up that vertical inclination, and that meant we could come down comfortably on top of the target, taking scratch fire from them but dealing maximum damage in return. As for the Spitfire Mark 1A, well, battle rating 2.3 monoplane fighter, down battle rated to a 2.0 situation. They can choose when they want to engage us because they have all the performance advantages in terms of top speed, climb rate, energy retention, you name it, they've got it. The only thing they haven't got over us is manoeuvrability. And that's why we'll need to get in close behind them, we'll need to take them by surprise and catch them when they're in a low energy state, so that way they can't just pull away from us. But we'll try that a little bit later. In the meantime, let's go back towards the centre of the map and talk about the climb rate of the I-15 M-22. The climb rate of this aircraft is interesting because it portrays a weakness in the engine. Compared to its battle rating peers, we're talking primarily about the biplanes firstly. What you'll find is, you're much like your biplane opposition, you'll be able to sustain a good climb at 20-degree climb angle maximum, all the way up to 2,000 metres altitude. But here's where the problems begin to start. At 2,000 metres altitude, you'll need to start considering lowering your climb angle to 15 degrees, or alternatively levelling the plane out, building up speed and then going again. That's because you lose your sustainability from this point onwards, and in actual fact you were losing it at 1,500 metres altitude. Because at 1,500 metres your engine performance begins to drop off in terms of both acceleration and climb rate. And every 500 metres you gain from that point onwards is going to see this drop off increase considerably. So by the time you get to 3,000 metres altitude, you're already flying against the performance of the engine. Which is why that maximum altitude limit on the engine of the M22 is quite painful to deal with at times, when you do go up against that one biplane fighter foe who decides they want to continue to go to altitude, because the likes of the Heinkel HE51 have the engine who can just keep on going just that little bit higher than you. And that also applies to the other I-15s you're going to be facing, because as we stated or hinted in the historical overview, the I-15 that we're flying here, the M22 variant, is the weakest in terms of engine power, whereas the other variants you're going to be seeing, so the I-15Bs, the I-15R and the I-15WR, all have the greater performing engines in terms of that net horsepower output. So do keep that in mind. And if we want to take this a little bit further to start talking about the monoplane fighter opposition, it's only echoed in the form of the P-26P shooters, the D-500s and the D-371s that you're going to be seeing as well. These planes all being able to sustain their climb for a much longer period of time and therefore gradually outclimb to altitude. And if we want to start going towards the biplanes that you'll see at the higher battle ratings, the I-153M62 and the Gladiator Mark II, or the monoplane fighters such as the Heinkel 100D1 all the way up at battle rating of 1.7, the discrepancy between your climb rate and their climb rate is only going to get greater and greater. So the net result of it is, if you want to go for those much higher altitudes, you really do need to plan your approach side climb or alternatively use sprinting climbs to do very sharp climbs for a brief period of time, then bleed out all your speed, level the plane and start again. And in doing so you can get some altitude, but it's not the most ideal approach. Instead, what you're seeing right now, in my opinion, is the best way to enjoy the I-15 M-22. And that is, stay low, get into the thick of it and enjoy this plane for what it's all about, the manoeuvrability and the firepower. So let's talk a little bit about the manoeuvrability. This plane is interesting because its manoeuvrability is the inverse of what you would expect from a biplane. It does very well in the medium to high speed range, but as you go to lower and lower speeds, it gets a bit painful. Let's elaborate. The ideal speed range of this plane, in my experience, is 225 to 325 km an hour. Because as you go to lower and lower speeds, what you'll find is the elevator begins to become a little bit heavier, but more importantly as well, the rudder starts to show some very interesting side effects. And to talk about that, we need to talk about the control surfaces. So starting with the rudder. In general, your rudder is strong, and it gives you a very tight flat rudder turn circle. However, when you go below 150 km an hour, the reset time on the rudder, so you've just used it and you want it to return to the centre position, below 150 km an hour, this reset time is a very long period of time compared to what you'll be used to. It pretty much quadruples, and what this means is, instead of it taking you, say, half a second to return to that middle position, it's going to take at least 2 seconds to return to that central position. And this will make the plane feel very awkward because you can no longer, unlike say a Hawker Fury Mark 1, choose to just flick the rudder at 130 km an hour to do a very tight stall turn, a hammerhead, or just do a flat turn and stay right on the foe's 6 or try to evade them. Instead, what you have to do in the I-15 M-22 is let the rudder return to the central position, otherwise you may end up prematurely stalling the aircraft or causing it to go into a spin. At the other end, when you go into those high speed situations with the rudder, there is no lock up at high speed, meaning it performs just as well at 400 km an hour as it will at 250 km an hour. So that is a positive, but you're not normally going to be seeing those scenarios. But those low speed scenarios against fellow biplanes, that's where you're going to be caught out on the rudder. As for your roll rate, what you'll find is the roll rate of this plane is actually rather average and not what you'd expect for a biplane. You'd expect this plane to be rolling very quickly. It doesn't feel that way, and it rolls at the same rate as the likes of say a C200 Series 3 as we saw earlier. In fact, if not a little bit slower. And that's something to keep in mind as well. Your opposition will typically have the advantage in terms of roll rate within the biplane fighter class. Meaning that changes in direction on the fly, particularly sets of flat scissors, are going to cause you a bit of a headache, or rolling scissors even more so, because you'll just be that little bit behind in terms of the direction change. On the plus side, when you go into a high speed dive, the only time you're going to experience the lockup is 25% between 400 and 425 km an hour, making your direction change take a little bit longer in a dive, but you'll be used to it because of the slower roll rate on average anyway. As for the elevator, it's a very strong elevator here, very tight loop circle, matching the likes of the Heinkel HE51 and only falling behind the Key 10. It's going to outloop the success of the I-15 BIS quite easily because that plane's got a heavier elevator. In terms of your loop, you'll need to start it at 95 km an hour or higher, otherwise you'll find yourself stalling mid-loop. And when you go into a high speed dive between 350 and 400 km an hour, you'll lose 25% on the initial response of the elevator. But here we could use our elevator to follow the Spitfire Mark 1A cleanly, and we eventually set them on fire. That's where the rounds are going in, they puncture a fuel tank, and that Spitfire is going to take a lot of damage before the fire finally goes out. We're not getting the kill, unfortunately, we were really hoping for it. That goes to show you the point from earlier about trying to ambush those monoplane fighters who try to use their speed and performance to stay away from you. And in the end, if you catch them for that brief period of time, you will be able to do considerable damage because of the machine guns that you've got, and that will give you the chance to do damage which can take them out of the game or force them to have to return to the airfield, which the Spitfire here is definitely going to have to do when that fire goes out because that plane looks absolutely crippled. Unfortunately, we're not going to get the time to see them off, and instead the game comes to its end and it's time for us to take a look at the post-game stats. By deploying our I-15 M-22 down low and in the thick of the furball as this plane likes to be used, we're able to pick up 9 kills and 2 assists, netting us 14,507 Silver Lions and 3,086 research points. Now it could be argued that this first gameplay has demonstrated typical biplane fighter behaviour. You want to be turn fighting with everyone, you want to be stuck in there, keep the speed down low, avoid getting caught out in the open up at higher altitude or being bounced by someone from an even higher altitude, and just enjoy it for what it is. But at the same time, we've also exhibited some inverse characteristics in the I-15 M-22 that would perhaps not be expected for a biplane fighter. That when you go slower and slower, the performance of this plane in terms of manoeuvrability actually starts to drop away, particularly below the 150 km an hour boundary. because not only does your elevator become heavier naturally as you're losing more and more speed, but also the rudder of this plane loses its ability to return to the central position as quickly as the majority of your biplane and a good chunk of your reserve monoplane fighter opposition. And what it means is you're prone to hanging this plane in midair, and your foes are able to stay tight on your 6 or alternatively gain the upper hand in that very low speed dogfight. So that's what you need to avoid in the I-15 M-22, going too slow to be able to stay in the fight. And in doing so, as we're able to see, we net ourselves a nice set of rewards and we're able to pick up kills on the fly. And the thing we need to move on to now with our second gameplay in deploying the I-15 M-22 in a very similar fashion is the firepower available to this plane and why it's a key advantage compared to a good chunk of its opposition. For our final gameplay of today, on the ground strike map Western Europe using the same setup as before, and let's immediately jump into the firepower question. Why is it an advantage in the case of the I-15 M-22? Well, simply put, you have one of the higher burst mass ratings within the reserve battle rating category. Whereas most of your biplane fighter opposition will be armed with 2 light caliber machine guns, you have 4. Meaning that when you have a single second on target or half a second, your burst mass is going to make the difference in allowing you to achieve a critical hit if not the outright kill, whereas your opponents are going to have to nip away at their targets and gradually bring them down. And that's why in the first gameplay you've seen it, and again you're going to see it here to an extent, we're able to chain together multiple kills in the case of the I-15 M-22 because you have that firepower to do so. Whereas with planes such as the Fury Mark I, you have to invest a lot of time on finally bringing down one foe before going on to the next one, which can prove rather frustrating when there's multiple foes around at close range. Now it's not all singing and dancing in the case of the PV-1 machine guns that you have. You have to keep in mind that in the reserve category there are a number of planes such as the French reserve aircraft, so the D500s and the D371s, and also one of the P26 pea shooters which have equal if not superior firepower, it could be argued. In the case of your French counterparts, they have 4 machine guns within the light machine gun caliber category, and when we talk about that pea shooter, it does have a 50 cal on the nose, which gives it a range advantage and also a burst mass rating advantage with that singular machine gun. But on top of that, you have to think about the fact that the PV-1 machine gun has a tendency to overheat very quickly. And we'll be seeing it here in this gameplay when the machine gun is going to jam a good number of times because of overheating. And this is with a crew where I've maxed out the weapon maintenance skill, albeit I'm not running an aced crew, I'm running an expert crew, but you get the picture. Even when you invest a lot of points in your crew, these PV-1 machine guns are still going to jam. And that can cause you not to expend all 3,000 rounds of ammunition before you go for that reload, and sometimes you'll be forced into a reload when you don't want to. So using those machine guns in bursts of a maximum duration of 3 seconds will be ideal when you're starting to max out your crew, or ideally no more than a 1.5 to 2 second burst before you give it a bit of space to breathe and then fire once again. And in doing so the results will come. And we'll see that against the Heinkel 111H3 here, where we're going to come down hard on top of them, but we're going to see that this medium bomber is a bit of a bullet sponge until we start to aim for weak points or we're throwing tons and tons of rounds. And we want to avoid jamming our machine guns, and instead what we're going to do is have that first pass and quickly come around on their 6 and really start to rip into them. And as we do so, we'll see that the left hand wing comes flying off, picking up another kill. And in the ideal case we would aim for the engines if we saw them flying flat and try and take out the engines so that way we don't have to expend as much time on target. Now coming around on the RE2000 Series 1 here, we start to cut into them. We do get surprised by a G50 Series 2, who we're also going to work on by reversing the situation. They've come in with a lot of speed. And that brings us on to durability, because we've seen our biplane opponents go down rather rapidly, but haven't taken some hits of our own now. This clarifies that this plane is not an exception in terms of the general rule of biplanes in that they're not very durable. Their durability is poor as a whole. But the thing to watch out for most in the case of the I-15 M-22 is that the engine of this plane is susceptible to taking extreme damage in the first instance, and a clear shot on the fuselage of this plane outside of a head-on will typically lead to the engine taking damage, and it will normally go orange straight away, losing 50% of its performance. And that's why I'm very hesitant to stay right behind the turret machine gun of the Dornier 17Z7 here, trying to be a little bit more evasive, perhaps even take the machine gunner out and set them on fire and taking out the tail control of the enemy aircraft, and now pulling our distance to avoid those machine gun rounds being too accurate. If we do get a hit on the engine, it normally goes orange, taking away 50% of the performance, and if it goes red, which also happens on a good case as well, then we'll find that we'll lose 75% of our engine's performance and the engine will start to die very gradually, which means you'll have to start heading back to your airfield to repair or get ready to land in the open battlefield. And in a head-to-head, that's where the engine is going to get slaughtered, so because it's the primary thing that's pointing towards the foe coming towards you. The engine is right at the front of the aircraft, and it's going to be the first target they can really and cleanly see. So instead, using head-ons to your advantage to get close to your foe and use your manoeuvrability to dodge the incoming fire is going to be more effective than simply pointing the nose towards the enemy and holding down the trigger. Because sure, you can use your firepower, as mentioned previously, to rip apart a foe, but is it worth it when you just simply lose your engine in the first pass? Well, not necessarily in my opinion. Now, outside of that, the general durability rules apply, and that you can take multiple hits in a biplane from light caliber machine gun fire, and we're going to see that here. But once you start going towards heavier caliber weaponry, so a heavy machine gun, or alternatively a 20mm cannon, such as was the case in that Dornier 17Z7, that's where problems really start to come in. It only takes one hit for this plane to completely fall apart. As we tear apart the Heinkel HE-51B there for another kill, now come down on a Heinkel 51C. And this little dogfight that you're going to be seeing between us here is a demonstration of the fact we want to avoid losing our speed wherever possible in these close-knit turn fights. Because against our opponent here we are going to go to lower and lower speeds, and where the Heinkel 51C1 is going to lose out in the fact is they did not turn this into a turn fight in the vertical, so in other words a climbing spiral. Because if they had, you'll see that our speed is going to continue dropping as we get closer and closer to one another. Our speed's going to drop below 150 km an hour, and we're starting to get a bit jittery on using our rudder here. And we're trying to mitigate this already by turning above our foe, because we realised they weren't going to use the vertical to their advantage, and that gave us the upper hand to come around on the rudder, which was stuck in the hard-on position there to the right, and we're able to bring them apart for another kill, before snapping onto the Junkers 87D there to bring up another kill, and now we're looking at the BA65K40 now to try and pick up a further kill, trying to make it a triple. And here with our guns already flashing red, we can see how they're ready to jam. We pick up the kill, and that's another plane out of the sky. Before another foe comes charging in, we fly very close to the ground, not checking the ground with our split S there. The Heinkel 51B goes charging into the ground, and we almost did ourselves. But that goes to show you the tight loop circle of the I-15 M-22. We could get away with that without checking. Now, outside of durability, because we've taken some fire, we've got some ground fire coming up towards us, what else is there to note? Well, let's come back to that concept of speed. The M-22 engine, whilst it's not too powerful, does have enough power to enable you to build up your speed from a stall of 58 km an hour to 250 km an hour at a rather fast rate, and then there's a gradual drop off that increases significantly at 300 km an hour. With more emergency power, I should say, the strain on acceleration doesn't improve too much. You will accelerate faster with WEP active to 275 km an hour, then the same drop off pattern as before occurs, so you experience a gradual drop off that becomes more pronounced at 300 km an hour. So you're not going to be chasing down many foes, and as you go to higher and higher altitudes, bombers such as the BR-20 will just simply pull away from you unless you've been able to surprise them or get them in a head-to-head, because you just don't have the top speed. As for your stall recovery, as we avoid going into a stall at this point, we level out the plane. Do keep in mind it's very difficult to actually stall this plane unless you go into a climbing angle really above 50 degrees. Although using a 50-degree angle, so you stall at 50 degrees, you'll find that the stall recovery is extremely fast. You only need to build your speed up to 60 km an hour, so add 2 km an hour speed to the plane. And in realistic terms, what does that mean? Well, the nose drops by 1 degree to 49 degrees, the plane builds up a little bit of speed, and it's ready to go again. And this Heinkel 100D1 was a little bit nasty, shooting at us with their machine guns, so we return fire, getting some scratching hits, but you can see the limited range on the machine guns here. Really only extending out to 450 metres maximum, if not only 400, and we're trying to get some return fire on the Heinkel 100, closing the distance on their beam as they turn in front of us. And despite them being a fast aircraft, we're leading enough to get some scratching hits. And we'll gradually catch up to them if they decide to come back. We'll try to do what we did to the Spitfire Mark 1A earlier on. They do appear to be turning towards us at this point, now allowing us to close the distance. In terms of the maximum altitude limit on your control surfaces, you don't need to worry about that, or it being 6,000 metres before heaviness is added to your elevator, gradually widening your turn circle. You're never really going to see that. And as the game's starting to come to its end, there's not much else to note. The energy retention stakes are pretty standard for a biplane. In the horizontal, it's average. You'll bleed speed in a dedicated turn until you hit 240 km an hour, remembering you don't have flaps available. Your rudder's going to bleed a lot of energy, do keep that in mind when you use it. In the vertical, you're not well suited for boom and zoom, simply because you can only return to your original state in a 450 metre dive on engine power, 500 metres with war emergency power, so that limits your boom and zoom potential massively. And in a straight line, you're only going to hold your speed at 340 km an hour after coming out of a dive, where your maximum dive speed is 635 km an hour. But your dive acceleration is never going to enable that really, because you're fast to 400 km an hour, and that should be pointed out. You dive very quickly initially, and there's a gradual drop off to 500 km an hour, and then there's a massive drop off beyond this. But with that, the game drops off, our engine's knocked out almost, it's time to take a look at the post game stats. By again deploying our I-15 M-22 down low, trying to get it in the midst of a furball and turn with everything that comes across our path, avoiding running out of speed, but at the same time trying to make the most of our firepower advantage, we're able to pick up 11 kills, netting us 17,169 silver lions and 2,572 research points. When facing the I-15 M-22 in a one-on-one engagement, I can recommend two main approaches to defeating this aircraft. In the instance that you're flying a monoplane fighter, either at the same battle rating, for example the P-26A 33P shooter, the D500 etc, or a higher battle rating, such as the C200-3 or the MS405C1, you'll have the advantage over the I-15 M-22 in terms of speed and energy retention in both the vertical and straight line. These advantages advocate the usage of boom and zoom attacks, whereby you should seek to attack the I-15 M-22 from an altitude advantage of at least 1,000 metres. This will give you the opportunity to build up your speed in your dive, which enables you to break away to safety if you miss your shots and the I-15 M-22 attempts to pursue you. Moreover, as the I-15 M-22 relishes the opportunity to become part of a furball, striking the plane where it's in the midst of a dogfight is ideal, as it is very unlikely their pilot will anticipate your incoming presence, granting you more time on target before they react to your firepower. Alternatively, if you're flying a biplane fighter either at the same battle rating, so a Fury Mark 1 or a CR-32, or a higher battle rating, the examples being the CR-42 and the F3F-2, I would encourage you to take the I-15 M-22 on in a turn fight with the aim of forcing the speed of the engagement to go below 150 km an hour as soon as possible. The reason for this is that the I-15 M-22 is one of the most manoeuvrable biplane fighters available so long as its speed is above 150 km an hour. Possessing a turn circle that is only beaten by the Key 10s and the I-153 M62. However, much like its historical counterpart, below 150 km an hour the plane becomes unstable, particularly with respect to its rudder, whereas most of its biplane opponents will remain comfortable in terms of controllability. One may trigger this weakness by shifting the turnfight into the vertical through manoeuvres such as an Immelman or by conducting a climbing spiral, so raising your plane's altitude as you conduct a standard turn. Once the speed of the engagement drops below 150 km an hour, making manoeuvres on your aircraft's rudder, such as a flat rudder turn or a hammerhead, will enable you to get onto the 6 of the I-15 M-22. To wrap up, let's first recap the strengths and weaknesses of the I-15 M-22. Its main strengths are: Number 1. Manoeuvrability with speed. Above 150 km an hour, the I-15 M-22 is one of the most agile biplanes within its battle rating range, second only to the Key 10s and I-153 M62. As a result, the biplane will feel its most comfortable when deployed in the midst of a furball, coming around on the 6 of its opponents very quickly. Number 2. Greater firepower. Whereas most reserve biplane fighter aircraft possess 2 machine guns, the I-15 M-22 possesses 4. This increased burst mass allows the plane to down its opponents in a shorter time period as long as you are accurate, reducing the need to have to gradually chip away at each target that crosses into your line of fire. And number 3, strong initial dive acceleration. The I-15 M-22 accelerates rapidly, up to 400 km an hour in a sharp dive, meaning the short distance dives can be used to quickly rebuild the plane's speed following an extended turn fight, return the plane to its ideal speed range at 225 to 325 km an hour in preparation for the next engagement. As for its key weaknesses, number 1, unstable at low speeds. Unlike most of its biplane fighter opposition, the I-15 M-22 does not enjoy dogfights at speeds below 150 km an hour, which rudder causing the plane to become unstable and prone to stalling out prematurely. Therefore, keeping the plane's speed above this threshold is vital success in a turn fight against a fellow biplane. And number 2, vulnerable engine. When under fire from a given direction, the I-15 M-22's engine is prone to taking significant damage, which can see its performance deteriorate rapidly. This issue is only furthered in head-ons, whereby the engine can be knocked out instantaneously unless you take evasive action. As for my final opinion of the aircraft, the I-15 M-22 is an enjoyable biplane fighter which has access to above average manoeuvrability and firepower for its battle rating, these two elements combining to allow the plane to rapidly cut through its opposition within a furball. However, unlike its battle rating contemporaries, one can be caught out by the fact its manoeuvrability is only retained as long as the plane's speed is kept above 150 km an hour, As a result, this will encourage pilots both new and old to watch their speed when turn fighting in the I-15 M-22, and in doing so will enable the plane to live up to its reputation of being the snub-nosed star of Spain. With that is all I've got time for today. For my next review in 2 weeks' time, i.e. Sunday the 7th of April 2019, I intend to review either number 1, the Ki-61 Mark II, a Tier 3 battle rating 4.7 Japanese fighter, or number 2, the F2A-1 Buffalo, a Tier 1 battle rating 2.0 American fighter. Which of these two aircraft I review is entirely up to you. You can cast your vote by using the hyperlink in the description of this video. Polling will close at 1200 hours British Summer Time on Sunday the 31st of March 2019. I've been TX141. If you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, as always, take care and good luck in the skies.